Congratulations. That's exciting. We want to be a lot of part of this game. We have a citywide sponsorship. And oftentimes people get that confused with like it's nice and yeah, so lots of exciting things going on right now. Thank you.
Yeah, that's during. Yeah.
Yeah, I was really. And then, yeah, I was really good.
Oh, yeah.
That's great. Very good. No, yes. We do. We too will get to. Yeah. And I have two more raise the out and into the training for it. Okay, she wanted to thinking of I get it. So yeah, that. No, I didn't really. Yeah, you know, yeah. Yeah. No, I didn't understand. I thought I would be able to let her know she was. Yeah. Great. That's good. Oh my. Okay. Excellent. Yeah. Nice. So good. Yeah, nice to see you. Yeah, it's so nice. I can't see you. Excited for land use. It's a great hour or so, and maybe I'll, there's always something. Yeah, they got everything. I'm gonna use that. Oh my gosh. It is.
Also,
I didn't have a picture. So I'm sitting here trying to do a selfie. I usually in the office, laughing at me, just figured, and then she had tears coming down, and I was thinking, yeah.
this is where.
Yeah, but there's certainly. Then when you get to know your thoughts, there's not one in me. Yeah. Even intended, so. Yeah. Hi there.
We gotta have that shit tomorrow.
So your teachers. Very good.
Oh.
Awesome. Yeah, totally. I mean, we. Right. And I was on that.
So I went.
And then say someone's a boy.
Yeah.
And I.
Oh, he's an idea here, this thing. They didn't talk about that.
Yeah, I know, the universe works.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's.
Everything else.
It's
And one here.
road rage dispute is the governor has agreed that they ran interstate. Which is like.
They need to, you know, be a lot of.
We're not, yeah, take out, but that's why we're not doing that. Last year he worked in, yeah. Going around the kids, so that was talking about how great they are. And it was very much.
No, it's my project.
You should write a little bit more on the I think needs to be admitted that. I just noticed that. Yeah. And maybe I'll put your hair. And they're kind of wired. Like the math doesn't work out. Why are you getting older? Like, mine has a step. That's not how it works. Not really, yeah. I know, I am really enjoying this.
So.
I'll talk to you. You know.
Alright, I think we're gonna get kicked off here, guys. Yeah, it got really quiet. Well, thank you all for being here today. We're really grateful to have you in this room with us, having this discussion. It couldn't be possible without many partners. One of those partners is OMEC R&D, so I'm going to kick it off to OMEC to talk a little bit about the space and what they're doing out here. So,
thank you. Yeah. My name is John. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications here at OMEC R&D. I want to welcome you to the facility. Just to give you a little bit of background of who we are and what we do. OMEC R&D got started around 2017. The function of the facility is to do research and development, both additive and subtractive manufacturing. So subtractive is your typical CNC machining where you start with a block of metal, you whittle away until you find the final product. Additive is what you would call 3D printing, but with metals. So we're doing a lot of research in the 7 different forms of 3D printing and how it can help address manufacturing needs and concerns. So we're very proud. We have around 40 individual companies that are all members who benefit the research that we're doing. Members include Daimler, Boeing, Oregon Tool, Sugino, a lot of cutting tool members who really want to see research develop and help them with their manufacturing needs. So it's a collaboration that we're very proud of. We have a lot of members who I like to say it's a Romeo and Juliet situation where the Montagues and the Capulets don't talk to each other in industry. When they come here, they recognize that this collaboration floats all boats. So it's a very unique facility that you don't really see outside of industry. So this building that we're in right now actually just finished last year. We're actually having our year celebration this month. We had our final occupancy in July. We're going to be one of the very first facilities in the US that has all 7 and soon to be 8 forms of additive printing. The only other facility that has what we can do here is the US Navy. So we're very excited about the kind of economic development it's going to bring to Columbia County. I'd ask you to stay tuned and keep us in mind. Thank you.
Well, we can go to the next slide. I think everyone knows why they're here, right? Land use 101. So again, thank you for being here today. I hate to use the same joke twice in one day. I'm probably going to use it 4 times today, actually. So I apologize that I look like I'm in the witness protection program. I'm going through some cancer treatment stuff. And so you don't really want to see what's under here. But under here is me, Jason Moon. I'm the director of the Columbia County Small Business Development Center. And able to make this class possible through a lot of partnerships. A lot of familiar faces in the room, some new faces too. Some of you have heard this spiel already, but I'm going to go through it again. Columbia County SBDC is the newest small business development center in Oregon. We're one of 20 centers now, the first center in over a decade. And we're the only center in the state of Oregon that's not affiliated with a college or a community college. So we fall under the Columbia Economic Team, the economic umbrella for Columbia County, and we run independently, which gives us a lot of pros. not a lot of comments about that. So what we offer is free, no cost, one-on-one confidential business advising. So if you register with the center, you have no cost access to us. Through that, we can help you develop business plans, loan packaging, marketing plans, succession planning. But first and foremost, we're offering, again, no cost advising and education opportunities like this. On the slide as well, who I did mention is Sarah Trask, who works as the SBDC's program coordinator. Mark is also on this slide. Mark Knudsen is one of our business advisors. We actually just hired 2 more part-time business advisors too. All of us live and work here in Columbia County. And as I mentioned, these classes wouldn't be possible without the amazing partnerships and collaboration that we have with our community. WANA is sponsoring our Munch N Learn series for the entire year. And so I will hand it over to Megan before she has to take off to her next thing. But again, just want to thank WANA for being a great partner and making this happen.
You got it. Well, I'm pretty excited to see how many people are here in this room today. I asked Sierra, I was like, how many people do we have for this educational opportunity? I heard roughly 40 people or so. So that's pretty exciting. Yeah, so my name is Megan Fawcett. I'm the Community Engagement Director for WANA Credit Union. And you can see some fun facts up here about us, but one of my main responsibilities at the credit union is really to look for opportunities where there are gaps in knowledge around financial education, financial health. And when Jason reached out to me in Q4 of last year, he was like, hey, we've got this really great opportunity to educate small businesses, micro businesses as well on quite a few different topics to really kind of boost the business and grow just our communities so we can thrive. I said, yes, I would definitely like to be a sponsor of this event. So really excited to be here today. WANA Credit Union has made some really great changes over the course of the last year. And I know that from attending these month over month, we've gotten a lot of really great testimonies from small business owners around the fact that we have great products and services that really fit their needs. And so if you would ever like to discuss that, we definitely can, but I'm sure that this is going to be a really great educational event. Thank you for allowing me to have a minute. So awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. Thank you, WANA.
Before we jump into just some housekeeping things, if you want to get up and use the bathroom or grab more food, like you're not stuck to your chair for this little hour and a half, feel free to get up and stretch, or the bathrooms are right around the corner right there, food is right there. And additionally, we like to do just a quick introduction of everybody in the room. So if you could say your name, the business you're with, and then something you're hoping to learn more about, that will help our panel know what's happening. So this gentleman right there.
Well, my name's Don, and I'm just here to try to understand what's happening in Columbia County a little bit more. I've been here for over 25 years and never really participated, and always worked and retired now. So it's just find out stuff like this what's going on.
My name's Chris. I have an equipment rental business, Agers Equipment Rental Town, and with Gravel Farms here.
I'm Art, Gravel farmer, forester, and we've got some property here.
Richard Hyatt. I've been in Scappoose for about 10, 15 years, doing rental houses, Airbnbs, that sort of thing. Something to do in retirement.
I'm Mindy Sass. I own Northwest Plumbing Services in Sass at Home. I'm here to learn.
Anna Woods, Wandering Woods Farms in Cascadia Glamping. Definitely, since the two worlds greatly overlap through the entire county, curious about changes and learning more about permitting.
My name's Alta Lynch and I'm retired. I'm here to learn. I sit on county planning and I thought I'd learn a little bit more and integrate it because I get people asking me a lot of things.
April Beardsley, I run Tight Creek Farms out in Deer Island, and
I just come to these events to eat.
I'm Lisa Murphy. I'm an interior designer with BBL Architects. I'm going to work with a lot of small businesses when they're looking to develop properties.
I'm Trina Spang. I'm co-owner of Portrait Homes Northwest, a general contractor here in Columbia County. And there's always something new I could be learning, so I'd like to come to these events.
I'm Jamie Viveris. I'm the planning division manager for Columbia County, and I am here to fill in for Susie Dahl when she leaves.
And I'm Terry Lottie. I'm recently retired and I'm working with a nonprofit in Vernonia and realized it's been over 25 years since I've done anything with land use planning and thought I better refresh my memory.
My name's Josh Johnston. I live down the road and I've got some property in Scappoose and here to learn about zoning and building permits and planning.
Oh, I'm Ralph, and I came here wondering if I might see and learn something of why we can't get any business out here to develop that's gonna pay the taxes for all this.
I'm Joe Vasquez, with the city of Scappoose, mainly here because I heard there was some food. I want to learn from all the developers and learn. I'm the mayor of Scappoose, so fairly new, year and a half in, so I want to learn a lot about this land use. As we start to build it out there.
New to mayor, but not new to Scappoose, right?
New mayor, 40+ years in Scappoose.
I'm Erin Salisbury. I live in Yankton, but my day job is to help small business owners and entrepreneurs get the right resources at the right time. I work with Jason at the SBDC, but I'm here because there's always questions and problems that people are trying to solve. So it helps to learn from the pros.
And I'm Wella with Columbia Economic Team and same as Erin, just here to learn.
Paul Vogel, Columbia Economic Team, and I'm standing next to you.
Speaking of food, like Sarah mentioned earlier, feel free to get up at any time, grab some food. We partnered with Hangry to provide the food platters today, and if you haven't had their stuff, it's amazing every time they knock it out of the park. So make sure that you get up and help yourself so we don't have to take it home. That being said, I'm now going to introduce our panel. I want to give you a little insight in how we organize these things. It takes a lot of coordination and behind the scenes organization. And typically it's Sierra and I that just come up with some ideas and we're like, oh, well, maybe so-and-so will want to do this class, or maybe this person will want to be on the panel. And I think that we originally reached out to Chris here. And I know that everyone has their passions. I'm a big nerd. I nerd about a lot of things. I've never been a part of an email chain that's been so nerdy as this one right here. I couldn't even chime in at the point. It was almost laughing, but they're here to sort of decipher that language and present to you today. So I'm gonna go down the table and let them each introduce themselves, and then we'll get into the presentation and Q&A. So we'll start with you, Susie.
Hi, everyone. Susie Dahl with Columbia County Land Development Services. You helped frame my house a long time ago, I think, or partially, Mr. Eggers.
My dad.
But your dad, okay. He's younger than me, so I've been in Columbia County for over 50 years. I do have another meeting today at 3, so as Jamie said, she'll be filling in for any Q&A when I'm done.
Okay. Hello everyone, I'm Dan Vasquez, BBL Architects. I'm an associate architect there, and I've got, I'd say, almost 30 years experience being a licensed architect. I would say a large part of that experience is with commercial and retail buildings, but also office and warehouse. And so that involves not only just ground up buildings, but also TIs, which is tenant improvements. And so we do what we can. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Chris Negelspach.
I'm the city engineer for the city of Scappoose. I've been with the city about 10 years, as of this fall. And, you know, we're a small group, so we handle a lot of the aspects of the projects as they come in from beginning to the end. So I get to see in all aspects of it. Before that, I was did about 15 years in private, so I came in as an engineer. I've done a lot of things on the design side, and now get to see the permit side. Here to help you understand a little better what we do and how we hopefully give you some insights into a better, you know, how things get processed and make it easier for us.
Right. Welcome. Good afternoon. John Howorth with 3J Consulting, consulting firm in Beaverton, Oregon. We do community planning, land use planning, civil engineering, design. So the stuff that Chris used to do back in the day, 15 years, I've got about 27 years of experience in that. I'm a civil engineer by trade and basically started the company in 2009 and working, doing this passion of mine and learned now for the last 15 years. Thanks for having us.
So we're gonna try to cover building and land development in 30 minutes or so. We get this condensed into, we can do a whole college course on this. But we're gonna cover the highlights. And so if we don't cover what you're interested in, we're gonna leave plenty of time at the end to answer, you know, questions on things. You know, if there's something you don't understand, some terminology, feel free to interrupt us, but and then this isn't gonna be just me talking and then handing it off. There'll be pieces of it that, you know, I'll hand off to Susie or Dan or John because they have, you know, that expertise is more in their wheelhouse. So these are the things we're gonna cover: history and purpose of land use. Where do you start in that process? Land use, once you have your land use approvals and you have the COAs, you guys know what those are, conditions of approval. What do you do? Building permits, what are they? What do you need them for? What are site development permits or site permits or construction permits? Each agency calls them a little bit different thing. The whole thing it can be really complicated depending on what you're trying to do. So where to start? We put together a flow chart that might be a good takeaway. It's kind of a bit to get through, but it's there. And then some important high level things to consider with your project when you're beginning to think about it through the process. Just some, you know, some big law things, that sort of stuff. The different kinds of permits that are involved in the different kinds of projects, basic process, consulting costs and fees, agency costs and fees, and then some funding sources if you don't have your own, and then some takeaways from all the panel here on, you know, just things that we see that we hope people will learn as they go through. And then at the very end, some Q&A. So, the history and purpose of land use. Senate Bill 100, it actually started, that Senate bill was actually, the framework for it was actually set up in, I think, 1968. It wasn't well defined, and so in 73, it had some time to figure out how to structure it. And so Senate Bill 100 in 73 had the framework for what we use today, and it's the basis of Oregon land use. And it's pretty unique in the country. So it's challenging, more challenging here than if you're used to develop in Texas or the Midwest somewhere, or Idaho, for instance. Really, the whole purpose of it was to protect farm and forest lands. Oregon didn't want to emulate what California what people were seeing in California, which was massive urban sprawl. And so there was a concern to protect that and densify development into these urban growth centers. The purpose,
there's 4 tenets of it, kind of livability, economic development, protecting resources, and efficient and orderly useful, which would make sense. And then that's kind of framed up in those statewide planning goals. So the things that the agencies use to regulate that, it starts out with the comprehensive plan, which is kind of overarching. It's more policy and goal oriented. It's a big book. It's like a 4-inch binder in our office. It could be much larger. Nobody ever looks at it except for the planner usually. Maybe once in a while I'll look at it, but not very often. But it basically sets out how you want to develop your specific code ordinances that guide the constraints for site development. So ordinances come out of that, and then the ordinances are essentially the model code that we follow for land development. And each agency is different. In some, back in the early 70s, there was model code put out. Cities would adopt it and then tweak it to fit their situation. And so essentially that's kind of what Scappoose has done. I'm sure most agencies will do it. In some cases, if it's, and again, it depends on the agency, you'll put together a staff report that addresses the criteria in the code that you're required to meet. And then that staff report gets, we'll vet it. We put together the conditions of approval that go with that. And then that goes to planning commission in some cases. At the city of Scappoose, virtually everything goes to planning commission, except for like home occupancy types of things. We're trying to change that to simplify it. I'm not sure if the county sends everything to planning commission like we do, but so it's a long kind of onerous process. We work on it every day to kind of help, make it as simple as possible. The 2 types of land use decisions that you'd find most frequently that require planning commission are limited land use and quasi judicial. Those are the 2 most prevalent ones that you deal with when you're doing virtually any project. And then basically the difference between those is limited land use is sort of, there's no subjectivity to it. You either meet the code or you don't. And so agencies will always try to make you meet the code. And then when you go to planning commission, it's more or less kind of a formality. If you are trying to modify the code through a planned unit development, or you want to use get conditional use on a property for something that's not outright permitted, then it's going to be quasi judicial and there's discretion in that. So you could get denied. So we try to avoid that as much as possible. It just doesn't fit all applications. Some of the things you want to do aren't identified in land use. And so that would be the case for that one. I'm going to hand this off to where to start to John.
Yeah, so where to start, that's the biggest question most developers or landowners have with a project, their property, what can we do with it? You're gonna have all kinds of ideas, but again, it goes back to what's that underlying comprehensive plan, what are the zoning, and what are some of the other requirements that you have to follow. So the first step, which is one of the biggest steps you want to take, is walk into the city, the county, and ask for just start asking questions about your property and what you can and can't do. Inquiry meeting with a group, give them your ideas, or even if you don't have an idea, say, what can I do outright? What other things can I do? What would that process might look like? And they'll be able to provide you with quite a bit of information. The next step, once you have a pretty good idea of what you want to do, is a pre-application meeting conference with the agency. That's typically where they bring in as many folks as they can to help out with different, you might have the city engineer there, the planner, the city planner, maybe public works to show up, help you with the process. Depending on the city, you get further out in Columbia County, then you might be even talking to all kinds of different people. And then once you have a good idea of what you want to do and move forward, then you're going to go to the land use application, put it together, and make it so. So one of the things from a consulting standpoint, one of the first things we always like to do is consultants to help folks out is to be a part of that pre-application meeting. Because we're typically at these meetings, we know the people on the other side of the table, we know what kind of questions we want to make sure we ask. Get those types of things out for you to help you. A lot of times we'll be able to be that first step as well. Give an idea of what you probably would like to be able to do, property, give you some sketches, that type of thing. And help you then start the process all the way through. Because it is, as Chris mentioned, it can be a little daunting. So reach out to the consultants as much as you possibly can to get a little bit of help and guidance. It's kind of like getting your own attorney ready to help you out with it, going through the process.
Susan, do you wanna talk? I know the county has a little bit different process. You don't have the inquiry meeting, right?
You guys call yours an inquiry meeting.
Yeah.
We do a lot of our consultations with people over the counter. Hopefully giving them some answers that they can go with, and then coming back to us for a pre-application meeting where we bring in people like the fire marshal, make sure you have water supply to your property. We'll bring in public works, trying to think of who else. Sometimes we'll bring in the city if we're inside the urban growth boundary. So we bring in all those people to talk to the applicant at a pre-application meeting, and what that does is give them the guidelines for what they need to provide for their site design review for further on to go to planning commission. So they have a complete idea of what their proposal is that can get to yes. That's the goal, is to get to yes. So.
And you know, that starts with a part of what that meeting entails is bringing in some documentation. And you know, I've always been told, well, you know, we'll even accept a napkin if you want, you know, as a client. But the more information you can bring, the better. The more they'll understand, the jurisdiction will understand the information that you're looking for. They'll be able to bring more people to the meeting. And so, you know, it can be something as basic as just some lines on a sheet, but you know, if you have the time and, you know, understand what you're wanting, getting an architect on board, having them put together a little bit more than just a line drawing, you know, if it's a building, okay, let's figure out where it's gonna be on the site. Let's throw some parking on there and let's figure out your entry points, because all those things will help them come back and go, oh, you can't do it there. And so the more you can kind of figure that information out, the better. And that allows us to come to the meeting and bring some consultants with us. And so, you know, it'd be fine if the architect just came and met with these people, but you know, if we get John out there too, you know, he knows a lot more about the civil side of things. He can ask questions during that meeting and, you know, solve a lot of problems that might occur down the road and get them done right and early.
So what's a land use application? Land use application is basic, it's basic information on what you intend to do with the property. It's exactly what Dan was saying. You'll have the building on there cited the way you want to have it, with all the access points identified. You might also have a little bit more information with regards to where you're going to get your sewer, your water, storms, what you're doing with your storm, what your building would look like. So you're going to be providing some information from architecture, depending on the jurisdiction, what the actual application level is going to be. Like Chris was alluding to earlier, there's different levels of applications and processes. Some are very over the counter, staff, I should say, staff decisions, and others are going to go all the way to a commission of some sort with the quasi judicial. So let's see what else we can talk about on that one. Yeah, you're gonna basically provide a plan and show the agency how that meets the code criteria. If it meets the code criteria, perfectly great. If it doesn't meet the code criteria, is there a process to get a variance for that deviation? What is the process to work through that? One thing that is very important about land use is it's not going to get you a permit for construction. Land use basically just allows you to do what you want to do, the use, literally what it is, what are you gonna do on the property, what is the use of it? So, for instance, you might have a commercial project, just ran into this yesterday or the other day, and they were, well, we're gonna take the Safeway and we're gonna make it a car dealership, so it's really, you know, commercial, nothing is changing, but that's a different use. So you'll have to go through the land use process, and you're thinking, well, what does that really trigger? Triggers what it might look like with the neighborhood, but the big one that I can think of right off the top of my head would be the traffic impacts. The traffic impacts from a grocery store to a car dealership are drastically different. So what does that mean for the development? What does that mean for the infrastructure that the city provides you? So there will be a process with that. So all the application information is usually on the city's county's website. If you have troubles with finding it, be sure to just reach out and ask questions or relay your consultants. So and just like Dan said, we said before, set up meetings to discuss the project early and often.
Is parking one of the things that it looked at that time?
Yeah, because it could change, like you mentioned, if you don't have a layout that, you know, say you want to build a 3,000 square foot, retail center. You know, it's going to require a certain number of parking stalls. Well, maybe you can't fit that on your site. So your building might need to get smaller, or you're doing apartments for multi-family. Those kinds of things, will drive the size of the building.
Yeah.
So, you may spend a whole bunch of time with Jason developing a performa for an 8-unit, multifamily project, but guess what? The site doesn't work. You don't have enough parking to meet the code.
Yeah, that is definitely a killer.
So all of a sudden now you got a 6-unit apartment building and you gotta go back to your lender and go, well, how did this doesn't pencil anymore? What do I do? I'd already bought the dirt. Now what do I do? So we want to try and help you avoid that also.
There's also ADA access, parking, and sometimes fire lane parking.
That's right. Yeah, fire access is huge. One of the things I did as a consultant a lot of times before I even met with anybody, except for my client, I would go and meet the fire department because they're very unique in how they approach things, and they have a lot of latitude. Because almost every single paragraph in fire code says or per fire marshal. And so you can go think they're going to go down this path, and all of a sudden they no, you've had problems with that, so we're going this way, and it could change everything. So we always invite them to.
Yeah, that's one of the first things that we address as well. And the client may be itching to go and say, oh, I got these ideas, we got to figure out parking first, because that will drive, in a lot of cases, exactly where your building's going.
I was just gonna add, we learned through experience that in terms of fire, first of all, they're very particular, very detail oriented, and they carry a big stick because they're an essential service. But multiple levels on the fire code issue. You've got state fire code, you have local jurisdictional stuff, and then you've got local jurisdictional stuff affected by whether it's in the county, the city, or anything like that. I looked at it more as a relationship thing, that let's get to know them and see what we need to do. A lot more complicated than that, so can't emphasize fire enough.
Yeah, it's a big issue, obviously. One reason why permits are in place is for life safety. Fire marshals are obviously involved in that quite a bit every day. So the other things that we ask questions about too about your site is what is the fire flow or the water availability from the project, because that could be a limiting factor right there, or adds cost to require pumps inside your building so that if there is a fire, there's pumps that can actually operate the sprinklers. And that's a big added cost to a project. So these are some of the things that we ask at these pre-application meetings that you may not be thinking about right off the bat. So we have a whole list of these questions we want to make sure we get answered.
fire is a big one. I mean, there's so many nuances to it. We've run into it even, like PCC, for instance, they have a lot of unique fire code requirements out there and just things you don't see every day, but that we all have to think about and multi-story buildings now oftentimes will require a ladder truck to get access to those. So we have issues with, fire truck, large fire truck access into small multifamily sites that have multiple stories. We have overhead interference, things that need to be considered with power that may need to be underground and that may cost a lot of money that you haven't thought about. So, that's sort of the purpose behind these early meetings with the agency. So I guess that's a good segue.
I'll mention too, we have about 20 minutes left of presentation. So once
We're
we're
gonna
like.
roll through this. This is the hard stuff. We're gonna get to the easy stuff.
And can you also be sure for our Zoom folks to talk loud into that mic so you're good.
Oh, the microphone's up there, right? Okay.
You don't actually have to move your neck that way.
The microphone.
It's a little louder.
This is our first time presenting over here, so. So we covered the inquiry meeting a little bit. I'm not gonna drone on about that. Like Dan said, like John said, like Susan said, it's kind of a garbage in, garbage out kind of thing. The more you bring us, the better information we can provide back. When these come in, the inquiry meeting for us is a pretty low cost. It's an hour of time with the planner and the city engineer. And maybe the building official, sometimes if they're available, it's pretty high level. But again, if we have a lot of information, we're always going to research the site and or the property build, / building, if there's one there. And we're going to look at the kinds of things you're proposing versus what's there, what's allowed and all that. So we're going to give you some pretty good information just out of that meeting. But again, what we have, and we have literally done that with sketches before. So, you're just not going to get a whole lot of it. The other thing with the inquiry meetings, and this kind of is the same with the pre-app. We invite questions, and oftentimes what I see is that people aren't asking the right questions because you've never been a developer before, you've never done TIs before, you've never, put a building on a piece of property, and so you don't know what to ask, and so. I'm not necessarily compelled to just invent questions for you. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to play 50 questions with somebody over the table, but we will sort of have a little bit of give and take on that just to kind of find out what their intentions are. But it's good to kind of think of questions beforehand and come to those, when you submit the application to have those questions. It gives us time to think through on, without doing it on the fly. And that's sort of, I'll defer to John and Dan. That's sort of why it's important to have a consultant. Sometimes if it's complicated because or if it's over your head because they already know those questions. That's their expertise is knowing the right questions.
We have some 50 questions ready for it. Which leads us into the pre-app, and I don't want to belabor the pre-application conference, but I think your inquiry is an inquiry meeting. What's the charge on the inquiry meeting?
It's like $250, and then that fee rolls into the land use application, so it's not lost money. And then we at the pre-app, like Susie mentioned, we bring the whole team, like it's building, the public works director. We have now, we're including all the franchise utility companies, not just power. We have gas, we have Lumen, we have Comcast. So we're bringing everybody, we're inviting everybody, whether or not they show up is another thing. The fire marshal is invited. So you're getting, I think for us, it's like $450 for that. It's not that much. Again, that fee, I think, rolls into the land use applications. It's not lost. We're going to bring to bear all of that. All of those folks that are experts on that. Great.
So then the pre-app, I don't want to go through all this. We'll have the handout for you to read. But basically going into pre-app next is really important to get all these questions answered and move forward. So I asked the question for the inquiry because I think we like to talk about getting the pre-app before the pre-app. That's basically our connections with the agencies and having questions, like the phone and call and ask questions about particular things that we may not be totally, confident about, so we ask those questions, but all the other stuff we're knowledgeable about what we can and can't do, and how to navigate these events, be prepared. So, and moving on to the next one, obtaining the site building, construction, permits. And this is going to the next level, so we've gone through your land use, application, and, sorry. That's- But anyway, you go to get your land use and you're done with land use, and that basically would generate the approvals to do what you want to do in terms of the use. It will also add another document to the building codes, the site development codes, all the other codes that are out there, and that is the final conditions of approval that the agency may want to put on the application. So you may be required to upsize some height, or you may be required to have a certain look to the building or a certain size to the building that you may not have had perfectly dialed in during the land use application process. So those are where they kind of massage your final project and say, okay, move forward. It gives Chris, as a city engineer, and other reviewers another document to make sure they're checking that you're meeting the stuff. So once you get that, then you get into your site and your building construction permits, and there's two different types of permits. Just want to make sure to emphasize that. Worked with people that have been in the business for a while, and they were doing building permits. I said, we're doing site development permits, and it's different. You need to have a site development permit before the times you get your building permits. So you have to look at that process and what comes first. But there's public works standards, there's the building, which will have structural code, ADA codes, plumbing codes, electrical, HVAC, all the things that basically provide for life safety. And Dan, you probably know more about this.
Yeah, well, you kind of took, you know, some of that thunder here, but that's fine, we're on a tight schedule. So, yeah, you've got plumbing, you've got electrical, you've got all these various permits, mechanical, structural. Structural is actually tied into life safety. But, so the architect kind of combines all those packages together. But so, and you know, this gets back to the, you know, fire being one of the critical things for life safety. So you got fire, there's also occupancy that's a big factor. Because once you determine your use, you determine your occupancy, now you gotta deal with exiting. And so that's another element of, okay, we're exiting out of the building, we don't have enough exits, so now we gotta create another exit. Or occupancy may, if it is a change of occupancy, quantity of occupants might up your parking. So now you're back to looking at the parking. So you know, getting all that addressed, I think that, yeah, I mean, that's the major components. You might have the health department, because you've got food prep. And that's a big one that I've run into before. I've got some examples that we can go through during the question and answer, but those type of things are the important elements that they're required for a building permit.
I think you did.
That's a big text, so I don't use my glasses. Yeah, identify conflicts in the building and civil. So again, that gets back to the parking issues and that sort of thing. Oh, yeah, well, okay, so then there are, at the same time, you might be doing a cost estimate where you're looking at, you know, owners looking at costs, and so now there's the balancing act of, all right, we need to save money, how can we save money? And it goes back to, all right, well, whatever we do, we can't affect the building permits, so there's that kind of go between as well.
And site permits, so what are the site permits? I mentioned that earlier, different than the building permit, but site permits are going to be For offsite, which we call not on your property, might be your frontage improvements, there might be sidewalks to construct in front of your property. There's gonna be grading that goes on site, that all is reviewed, building department or public works, depending on the agencies and how they handle those. Access permits for traffic, making sure that you're not putting your driveway too close to another driveway or offsetting them properly, so you can avoid accidents from people coming in and out of driveways. So those things are looked at. There's obviously the stuff on site as well, like Oregon drainage law, where you have to take the water from your neighbors and you gotta give it to the neighbors if it's going, downhill and one of them back in a similar fashion. You'll also have to do stormwater improvements, most likely for detention, so we don't cause additional flooding. There's a lot of stuff to think about when you're on the site, environmental impacts, geotechnical traffic, all those types of consultants will be helping you on the site. So, same type of thing with costs. Everybody's looking at costs along the way, so we're going to be looking at making adjustments as needed to the project. Value engineering, do it early. Value engineering early.
Right, well, and speaking of costs, there's a cost for the soft cost for these engineers we're talking about. So you got architects, you got civil engineers, you got all these other components that will require, fees in order to get you where you need to be. And so one of the things that we're always, looking to help you save costs. So if there's a way, if we do things where, we've got the architect being the umbrella and got my consultants underneath. If we want to break away and have the contractor do mechanical, electrical, plumbing permits on its own, then that's okay. That's a portion of the scope that we're not going to do. We still need to communicate with the contractor, and that means getting the contractor on board early. But as opposed to having our engineers spend time and money to do the costs or to do the work. Let's see. It goes back to consultants help by asking the right questions. So being able to figure out any issues and get those resolved early on and get some design components in that lead you in the right direction is the way to go. It's your turn.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'll let him. Oh, next. Yeah, okay, so here we go. So,
Everybody read that.
time doing this. So this kind of is a culmination of the various components that we have been talking about. So up at the top, you've got the applicant, and running down, that's kind of the applicant's tasks. The green is more actual work that's being done. But if you go to the right, you have a pre-application conference, and then you go to the authority having jurisdiction, call it the AHJ. So determine whether pre-application is needed. Okay, then you come back over to this side and you prepare a land use application. So it's that type of process. If you look in the middle, there are a couple of loops there where it goes from blue to green and then back to blue and green. So that's where working with the AHJ to get things, addressed and everything resolved. And a lot of times they may have additional comments. So you get into this process of reviews and additional work that needs to be done. And a lot of that is another one. So that's something that needs to be factored in, that, you've got that process. So the lower portion in the bigger green box, that's the building and site permits. So again, you're doing that same thing. You're going to blue, it's coming down. Do you have everything you need? Are you done? And there's that process of where we go back and forth to city, one or two times to get the process done. So all that information should be, tied in with these the rest of the pages, but, you know, if there are any questions, feel free to.
This is a good takeaway right here.
Yeah, we'll provide everyone, if you sign up with Eventbrite, these slides will be provided afterwards, so. You don't need equal vision right now.
Right.
Yeah, we're over halfway. How are we doing on time?
Not good. 8 minutes. 8 minutes.
We're on slide 8.
Speed talk.
All right, so high level things. First, when you're thinking about your project, where is it appropriate? You know, where do you want to be? Where do you kind of need to be based on land cost and utilities? If you don't need a lot of utilities, maybe you want to develop your county, right? If you don't need water and sewer necessarily, or you have really, you know, you need substation. Consider being the county. If you don't need frontage right on the highway or on the road, you want to just need a land. What's the land use zone? Super important. I mentioned utilities, offsite costs are going to be much less in the county than they are in the city, for instance. That would probably play into your thinking a little bit. The timing or the permit process, other considerations, you know, you've got all these other consultants and other land constraint issues that could pop up, like wetlands, you know, traffic impacts, floodplains, those kinds of things that all require special things to mitigate for. And then also, should you do a feed study? Should you get help with a feed study? If you don't know what all the needs might be, again, John and, you know, architects, civil engineers are really good at those feed studies together. So then you get the whole picture, as well as, you know, site and building trust, at least on at a high level. Different kinds of permits, and we've covered this. So it's building, as Dan mentioned, there's plumbing, structural, electrical, fire, county access permits, there's a county construction permit. And we lost Susan. In the city, we have a right-of-way permit, we have grading, we have site development permits, there's a 1200C with the DEQ. You may also have wetlands, floodplain permits with ODF and WDSL and or the Corps. It can get complicated. So, basic process, construction permits, you know, what you need, your land use application plan set is where you're going to start. You're going to dial in the details there with notes and stuff that your contractor is going to need to build. A lot of the things that we look for are outlined in the conditions of approval. So they're very specific things that have to be addressed. We won't issue our approvals oftentimes until other agencies have signed off, like fire, maybe partly the road is in the county. They need to sign off. DEQ, your 1200C. And then your consultants and other specialty consultants like geotech, those things they're going to need to help pull together help you pull together an appropriate package. Your geotech may have some special recommendations for surcharging the site, for instance. That's going to change a lot of things we're in. Again, consultants have specialty knowledge that's essential to help navigate that process. And then you submit plans and on all those reports, you put them into a package along with your fees, get them to the agency or agencies. Oftentimes it's multiple. You don't want to just submit to the county and forget the fire. You know, those planning departments respectively will also need to look at things too to make sure you're compliant with those things. And then, you know, importantly, kind of be patient. It takes a lot of time to get through this. And so agencies, believe it or not, have more than one project going on at a time. And so sometimes your stuff will be in a queue for a little bit before people can get to it and review it. So you might want to inquire about that just to get a sense of that timing. And now we're on 11, consulting costs. We're almost done. Consulting costs and fees.
Yeah, so the consulting costs and fees, obviously, for Dan and I to help out and be a part of the project as well as all the other consultants that might be needed. Plan on 12 to 25%, and it's a big range. The higher percentage is going to be something you want to apply on a smaller project because it's still is complicated. To do some of the projects that seem small, but there's still a lot of steps you gotta go through. So on a percentage, it can be pretty high. You get a bigger project, it's more expensive to do actual construction. Your consulting costs are gonna be a lot less as a percentage of the whole. Just keep that in mind when you're moving forward on a project and when you're planning for it. Contingencies are also another thing I like to make sure that the owners are thinking about if they're financing it, because there's always hidden surprises, especially when you get into the dirt. Most of your surprises, and Dan can probably speak to this a lot more than I can, because I don't know all the surprises in buildings that happen, but when you start digging in the dirt, things can you find something and you have to deal with it. And
Right.
Excavation is an expensive piece of the project, so. Yeah. So, yeah, contingencies are also large, again, size of project, how much data you have. You're starting off with a napkin sketch, you're gonna wanna use like a 50% because you don't have all the data yet. So the more information you get, the more refined your cost estimates. I think Chris knows a lot about the agency costs we use, but they're also there as well. We're gonna have application fees, processing fees, and query meeting fees, and then fees on engineering. Basically, it's trying to cover the cost of having staff available at the agency level to review the project for you. There's also fees, STCs, which are system development charges for transportation, water improvements, all of the necessary infrastructure that the city provides. Developers are putting the bill for that, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, and they're continuing to go up. So it's all the basic utilities at SDCs, and then now we have it's a excise tax for schools. And then there's bonding for public improvements, so there's a cost of it as well, if it's needed. So just keep in mind, there's the planning fees, the construction engineering fees, and then building fees. So it's kind of 3 buckets there. You're not gonna pay all, you're gonna do the planning stuff first, obviously, and then the engineering and building usually go together, so.
The food's free, guys. Food's free.
And now we're on the second to the last slide. Yeah.
Good. So clearly there's a lot of costs. So I guess the thing to keep in mind is you might need options, and that's where we look at, loans and, one with the credit union. It could seem overwhelming, but the fact that these different departments are here to help, and understanding that the amount of space you need and how much you can afford, that will help kind of guide this process. And I guess the other thing that I recognize is you're not doing it alone. You may think you are, but there are a lot of agencies and we will be there to help. John will be there to help as far as determining what you can spend. And if that gets brought out and if you're transparent on what you can spend, we will help you with determining how to best utilize them.
And also reach out to the organizations that are in economic development for opportunities that might be out there for grants downtown. Or urban renewal is an opportunity. Ask the agencies as well. It's never going to hurt to ask for money. Worst thing they're going to say is no, and you're back to where you started. So it's always, you never know if someone's saying, oh yeah, actually we have a grant for that. You can just apply, or you do certain things. So depending on the project, of course, but and then there's other opportunities. There's one comment here, there partnering opportunities is other agencies do work as well. So there might be a project the city's trying to get done nearby one of your properties. There's an opportunity to partner with them on a project that is 2 projects coming together as one in ways, and you can get economies of scale by doing that together. Lots of different things that you agree with, because everybody understands that development is not cheap, it's expensive, and it can take a lot longer than you ever anticipated. So
Yeah, I'd like to add it, it's brought up already, Columbia Economic Team, we have fingers on the pulse of what's happening around grants within the county through tourism or development. Also SBDC, we can help you with, if you do need to get a conventional loan or an SBA loan or a business origin loan product, we can help you with that packaging of that, making sure we're looking at your financials and setting you up for success, so.
That wraps it up for us.
So.
We definitely powered through those last few. But I think really the reason we have such a good showing in the room today is for this part, and that's the Q&A. So I'm not sure how we want to frame this, Sierra, but we just want to start off with questions. Do we have a prompt? I mean, I know that we have a lot of inquiring minds here. So again, we have city and county officials, we have consultants that have been in this line of work a long time, and we just want to make sure that we're pairing our business owners and potential business owners with the right resources. So who's going to start?
Yeah, anyone can start.
Yeah.
How are fees here compared to the metropolis?
I'm assuming that's directed to me. They're lower. They're not, they used to be much, they used to be, maybe a third less, but now they're increasing a bit because people want services. And so now like Scappoose, for instance, has a stormwater fee. We never used to have one. So it's $15 per household now, but now we're able to do stormwater improvements, which we were never able to do before. So water rates are going up because we have to upgrade equipment that's been in place now for 40 and 50 years, and that costs money.
Chris, am I right, when Scappoose, so we don't collect 100% of the cost. There's still a cost that Scappoose will absorb on some of these fees to try to entice some businesses. But so we do try to do a capture, but it's not 100% of the actual cost on some of the fees.
Yeah, so we like a lot of small agencies, we don't bill on a project, but we don't set it up and bill against a project. We're estimating those fees based on just like for our permit review fees, they're generally they're being subsidized. And planning especially is being subsidized. So on the planning and engineering side of it, those fees are being subsidized. Portland, for instance, they'll set up a project when you walk in the door and everybody bills to it just like you're on a job, like you would on a job. So every hour they spend on it, you're getting billed every nickel for that. Smaller agencies don't do that. But it's an impact.
Can I go on a little bit?
What's that?
No, somebody else has a question. Go if somebody else wants.
Right.
I don't really have a question, it's more of a statement. From my perspective, I'm a landlord in 3 states, 6, 8 counties, mostly commercial, and overwhelming is a light way to put it. My tenants, about half of them are probably gonna fail eventually. The cost of living and everything, and just not the return that they're looking for. And I agree with everything that's needed, but I think the end result, and the way I look at it is a little negative, because some of those are good businesses, they just can't. The profit margin is just not there, and that's not anybody's fault. This is just an observation, and it's something I deal with. I've always got somebody that's in crisis. It just goes with the
why do you think that is, Bart? I mean,
I don't know if it's poor planning on the person, am I landlord charging too much? That probably, I don't know. There's just so much in business to to know, and, sometimes you learn it from I don't know. Just something that, as I sit back, as I kind of track all the properties, it's like, okay, this one's burning, this one's doing great. Some are agricultural, they go up and down. Forestry, it's all over the board. And then commercials.
You know, just to piggyback on this, not to divert too much from land use, but I always get the actual percentages slightly wrong, but it's something like 70% of small business fails within the first 5 years. It's a very high percentage, right? But 50% of that 70% would succeed if they were engaging with advising. Whether it's SBDC or, you know, maybe it's consultancy through land use or whatever. So it's really important for, as small business owners, to seek out education opportunities, consultants, business advising, whatever it might be, to ensure that that success rate goes up. So thanks for sharing that, Vernon.
What's the scope of your authority or your permitting fees for city versus county? Is it the city limits or is it the growth boundary or?
Yeah, so if it's city limits, it'd be in the city, and then the county has, if it's.
So you're just dealing with the county if it's outside the city limits of Scappoose?
There's not really a lot there.
Okay, yeah, Chris alluded to, and I think, or maybe it was Susie earlier about if you have a project that's in the county but nearby the city, that they would bring the city to the meetings. That's basically just because they're the neighbor and there may have some impacts that the city might want to be involved with, or say, have something to say about it to help you out with development, even though you're not in the city. I've got projects where you're adjacent to ODOT and one county. I had a county line going down between two counties right down the middle of the street that we had to deal with. So who's going to review it and make the decision on whether or not what standards are going to be followed? So it ended up being the city. The county road, the city standards, city review. So it's those types of things that why they come together. But from a fee standpoint, typically it's whichever jurisdiction you're in, you might be paying city fees. You might also have some county fees if they own the road. For example, you might pay engineering review fees for the road. So those are all the things that we try to work out through that initial pre-application conference, because the pre-application conference is not only just for land use. It's also, we're going to start diving into other things like, okay, after land use, who's going to be reviewing this? What permits do we need after land use? Are you going to, you know, who's going to be involved in that?
I have a comment and a couple of questions. You know, land use, when it was first started, and we mentioned the urban growth boundaries to keep from farmland and agriculture. To me, it's just a joke, because urban growth boundary, if you look between Portland and Salem and Washington County, that farmland and agriculture is gone. I think land use needs to be reworked. Now, the stuff we've done here today is mostly kind of with the city, not so much the county. And county permits and different things are different than the city permits. Is there ever a case where you have the city and the county on the same property with somebody wanting a business or a development where they both have to come to an agreement on something?
Yes, there's been cases like that.
And what happens?
Not that, it's basically the property is split by the county line for some reason. And so we've had to go through the process with the county, and we had to go through a process with the city. Typically what you end up with from a site development, because that's usually where all the big changes are, is you use the most onerous requirements.
Yeah, because you guys have one here in Scappoose that's been a problem for a long time between that and the city, a business, that they can rent things out. Well, what do you do? Because most of it you started from the dirt hub. But let's say I'm out in the country and I have my pigs or I have my sheep or I have whatever, but I can't handle that anymore, but I want to do some classes or something. That's going to go under conditional use?
It depends on what zone you're located in and what type of use is.
Let's say agriculture.
There's a
Forestry, right. But so if you wanted, because I'll give you an example in Southern Oregon, my brother happened to work on ranches down there. But because of our building, our land use laws, they couldn't build like a bunkhouse or another housing deal on there. So you have no place for your hired hands to go. So if you wanted to teach, you wanted somebody to run your cattle or anything like that. Is there exceptions here in Columbia County that would do that for? You could bring in your RV or something and you'd have a place for your hired hand to stay.
There are many different types of dwellings in the agricultural zone that you can look into. There's seasonal worker, family member helping out with the farm.
Yeah, but they're living in your house because you don't want them there
these
like fish, you want them
these
out
are
for
like
3 days.
accessory dwellings, but not being.
So what would somebody ask for that? Let's say I had my farm.
It depends on exactly what you're looking for. Like there's probably 15 different types that I saw in our zoning code the other day. So
And then
they're very particular. Some of them are income based. It
Oh, I know.
really depends on what you're looking at.
So is the city like the county where people can protest?
Yeah, you can protest in the city.
Because if you have a business or a housing development coming, then people, you notify them like the county does. Notify the people all around, and then they can come in and cry and say, no, I don't want this business, or I don't want this development. Do you ever change your minds on that? Or it's already zoned and it's done that
No,
way?
it's like when I mentioned the 2 types of land use process. So if it's limited land use, you can't actively demonstrate during a hearing. Because, you know, that just disrupts the hearing. And so we would invite people that have an issue with the process or the project to, you know, you can either submit a written, you know, letter or something, a memo that says, or email, or whatever. Or you could come and speak, there's verbal testimony too, that's allowed in some cases. But generally, if you're saying like, I don't like this because, you know, I like the horse pasture and I like looking at the horses, well, there's nothing in the planning code that says that you've got to consider that. And so the planning commission is going to say, thanks for your comments, but it's not relevant to the criteria for approval. So we get a lot of that at the city. It's not considered at all. You know, it's great to kind of, you know, hear that people have those concerns, but you know, if you're a property owner and you want to put houses on your land as a subdivision, somebody that just likes the grass, sit watching the grass grow over there, they can't stop your project. Unless there's a compelling code-driven reason, right? So that's kind of the thing. When it comes to limited land use, the planning commission looks at criteria only. So protests aren't going to matter. Now, if it's quasi judicial and they have latitude, if you're asking for an accessory building that's not permitted outright, but it's conditional use, then they have discretion. And they can't say, hey, we're not gonna allow this to happen.
And conditional use, even when they do it in agriculture or forest land or whatever, if you have conditional use, and let's say you built your house, it burns up. You don't necessarily have to give them another conditional use to rebuild that.
No, not necessarily. That's absolutely right.
Yeah, and a lot of people aren't aware of that.
We do have a Zoom question, and then Hannah had her hand up.
Yes,
Yeah.
so on Zoom, how difficult is it to change zoning? For example, R7 to R5, I have 14,000 square foot property, which could ordinarily have been a 2 R7 lots. The siting of a duplex that was originally built on it doesn't allow the space to be 2 7,000 square foot lots, but it could be 9,000 and 5,000.
Okay, well, I'm like, do you want to take that or?
No.
When I first started mentioning the kind of layered land use, right, I was talking about the comprehensive plan. Hopefully the person.
Make sure you're speaking.
Here is. So the comprehensive plan, so all of the zones are defined in the comp plan, and then that plan is adopted essentially as those zones stay the same when you're looking at the zoning. The comp plan and the zoning map match essentially. So if you want to amend the zoning on your property, you have to go back and amend the comp plan. That goes back to the state. So the state essentially has to approve that. Now we can see stuff like, for instance, in the city of Scappoose, there might be something on the highway that's zoned something that doesn't make sense. You know what? Maybe that should be business zoning and it's like single family residential on the Highway 30. And you know, everybody might think, hey, this should be commercial. Okay, we agree with that. So if you come in and say, hey, I want to put a business on Highway 30, we say, great. We agree with that. We think this just got zoned, 100 years ago, and it's not right. So we'll take it in and we'll work with the state to change that. If it's reasonable, it makes sense. The problem is the state may not agree with that. So there's some risk in that, and it's a long process. It could take a year to get those approvals. And that goes through planning commission and council at the city. So it's a lengthy process.
Yeah, from zone to basically changing the zone, the comprehensive plan, you gotta remember, was developed and a lot of input was made to get the different types of zones, what type of zoning is next to other zones. Typically don't want to have residential zones next to an industrial zone because that won't help the market in the residential area because now you have some industrial use right in your backyard. So they try to work these things out so that the zones work well together and integrate, but that's not always the case in terms of the market or the desire of the property owner. So number one is for everyone who owns property is be extremely involved in the comprehensive plan processes that go on. There's requirements to update comprehensive plans by the state for every city, county, every how long that is 20 years. Yeah. So that's the place to be at the very beginning so that you can set yourself up for the best success. Moving down next, you went from R7 to R5, then you want to look at what does that do for the character of the area around you and looking at zoning. You're going to have to provide a response to why this makes sense to make a change to the zoning in order to achieve your goals, because again, those goals may not align with what comprehensive planning through the intending. So yeah, it might be better off for an R5 zone, but R7 is what was intended. And you have to understand why that was intended.
Yeah, and we're going through a 50-year planning process, which is pretty standing. It hasn't really happened too many places, but it's future, really forward-thinking planning. Council wanted to do, so we're doing that. We're kind of in the middle of about a 3-year process in that right now. And one of the things we're doing is to take a look at the zoning, really kind of go out and look where there might be some, places where it's a little inconsistent and we can clean it up, because we're going to have the state, everybody's going to be involved in it, all the state agency folks and planning commission and city council. So it's kind of a unique time to take a deep dive, look at that and clean it up. So that's what we're going to do.
And one quick follow-up question for it, in a minute, you can summarize your response. How friendly is our area for short-term rentals? I'm afraid to invest in a property that would be great for Airbnbs to just have rules, but the rules have changed and now my business model doesn't work for the property. Would you be grandfathered because it was allowed when you bought it and developed the property? So I think there's two questions from the city and the county perspective of short-term rentals, and can you be grandfathered?
The easy answer for me is to just punt that one to our city planner, because I have no idea. We may have some.
Airbnbs aren't allowed in Scappoose. Airbnbs aren't allowed in Scappoose, according to your planner.
Okay, so
They're
that's.
also not allowed in the county, according to the county.
Really?
Yeah, so the county, you have to qualify for a home occupation permit in the county in order to have short-term rental. Because it's considered a commercial use of a residential structure.
St. Helens allows them though? There's nobody from St. Helens here, but they have the Airbnb there. If you have some Airbnb in the county.
But again, the county operates on a complaint basis, so somebody has to complain in order for that to be adjusted.
Yeah, that was like your idea with the farm and just having like somebody come out and live in a trailer. It's all, there's people that are doing it and it's all complaint based at this point.
Well,
Well, really quick, I want to give the chance to the county to consider the question.
I've been with the county for 2 months, so I'm not sure. I don't want to say yes or no. I can look into it if you want to give me that person's contact.
I know with dog kennels, it doesn't grandfather in.
Yeah, I think from my experience is the only grandfathering is basically prior to Oregon's land use law. I think or if you own the property then, have intention to do something then and still own the property, you might be able to file for a measure 30, I can't remember the number now, 39, they're kind of
49.
49.
49,
I
yeah.
think it was 39, then 49 fixed a little bit.
Yeah, that went back and forth, and
Yeah.
you had a certain date to do it by, I believe.
Yeah, so those are really the only times you get grandfathered for sure. And then, yeah, so I don't know if just because you bought the property with the intentions, if you didn't provide an application for that from a land use, you're not going to be vested for that zone use most likely, so.
Is there ever kind of a conflict between the city and county where the county says no and the city says okay? I ran into that in Lincoln County where they pretty much passed laws that says no Airbnbs throughout the county, but the city says we're fine with it.
I think it's probably just a matter of who put code in place, you know, I mean, it's something that if a group of people came to the city and said, we wanna find a place to do this stuff, you know, the city would look at it. And again, those are kind of, you know, those would be things that have to go through the planning group, and then the city council. The city council will ultimately buy off on that. And so, you know, because those are ordinance changes, because that's new code. You like food cart pods, we had no code around food cart pods, so for up until about 4 years ago, we didn't allow them. You know, you could get a permit to have a food stand or a cart or whatever for like 90 days, but it wasn't renewable. So basically it was, you know, it just didn't address it because it wasn't a thing really until maybe a decade or 15 years ago. And so we saw the need, people were coming to the city. And so we decided to grab some code and modify it and run it through the planning approval process, council approval, and now we allow food cart pods. So
that's what I ran into in Lincoln County, as things change so rapidly that from the time you plan to buy the property to the time you put the plan in, everything's changed. And then the city says, well, your application is going to the county for approval. And both of them are reading off of a different.
That's interesting, because usually when you're in the city, you're gonna follow the city's code. They have to create their own.
City contracts with the county to do.
Oh, yeah, well, that's an interesting scenario, and ones that we get involved with a lot, and we have to navigate that, and sometimes a lot of these questions, I would also recommend getting land use attorney involved in some of this too, and because then it becomes.
More fees.
It is, but you might be able to get what you want and correct some of the interpretation of the code pretty quickly when you bring in an attorney with the staff plan and everything, because then it's like, this is how it works, here's code, here's back, there's our case law of this, there's a lot of that can help interpret the code. Because that's what we're all doing at the end of the day, is interpret the code and make sure we understand what the intent was.
So, yes, okay, so it's been kind of touched on a few times, so we've done the planning, we've done the lux, we've done the compatibility, we've done all of the things for our property, we have grandfather issues, we have flood zone issues, we have all of that. And we seem to be kind of stuck in this permanent loop of being kicked from agency to agency to agency to deal with some of these issues. You know, it's a very old property, there's a lot of challenges in that. Every single building on the property were built way before the code even existed. There's a lot of land use issues in all of that. And so one of the big issues that we found ourselves in currently is that as part of our land use compatibility process, the planner that we were working with actually suggested that we rezone our property. And as part of that, we started investigating that process, and that got DLD involved, that got like county, like everything else, and that's kind of what has triggered us to be in this loop. Do you have any recommendations on maybe a different agency to talk to kind of get us out of that loop?
I mean, if you're, so Martin State Land or DLCD is probably one, right? So they have to sign off on it. So,
Well, so they keep kicking it back to the county, saying the county has to make a decision, and then the county keeps telling me, well, you have to get an approval by DLCD.
well, so that goes
And-
back to sort of what I was saying about the kind of improper zoning things that sometimes we see is that, you know, you gotta get that agency on board with, they have to endorse it essentially. They have to say, hey, this makes sense. Because of its proximity to this or that, or you know what I mean? Like, it would be hard if you were in a particular zone and you're smack dab in the middle of it trying to rezone it and make it super urbanized or dense, you know, like your neighbors may not like that. So, you know, you've got to get that agency to kind of sign off on that. And I you know, can basically have some give and take with that together.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
So the county has suggested that it.
Yeah, so when we received our LUFs, they actually suggested that we zone out of primary forest and into forest agriculture to better accommodate our deferrals and our planting structure and like the plans and things like that that had already been in place in conjunction with some of the other systems that we were trying to develop.
So my question, I guess, to the panel here is, that, like you stated earlier, Chris, when situation like that arises, does the state look at the city or the county agency as like what is recommended, and do they take that recommendation into consideration?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can get the agency support, the state's gonna, they're gonna.
Right, no, and I get that, and that's why, like, the county, I have a document from the county saying we support the effort to rezone this property. And I sent that to DLCD and they said, the county's already made a decision, why are we involved? We shouldn't be involved.
Okay.
And the county keeps telling me that DLCD needs a sign off on it because we're rezoning a resource district.
So that sounds like a process.
Well, is that process of the top plan?
I was working with Hayden and Hayden isn't there anymore. Yeah.
Let me give you my contact after and we can touch base.
Okay.
I'll try to.
Yeah. I got trapped in the cycle. I missed it.
Are you working with any other consultants on this?
Yeah.
You have a consultant helping out with this?
Kind of, we had a land use consultant through Friends of Family Farmers that we had been working with, and then we also started talking to a land use attorney, and same, they all kind of said, well, you should get sign off by DLCD, and we said, well, we tried. And the planner that I was working with isn't there anymore, so then we also have the new problem of a lot of people in the office don't know the details around some of these issues, so. I was hoping to maybe find another person, like an engineer or somebody in town that could kind of jumpstart us out of this endless loop.
Well, there's two in the room, like, in town, so.
Well, I want to be mindful of time. We're almost right at 3:30 now. I know we could probably do this all day. And I appreciate each and every one of you being here. I know that sometimes this is a very frustrating topic for a lot of people. And again, that's why we're hoping to have this panel of people where now you can put face to name to agency, consultant, or whatever. And again, SPDC is always here for you as well if you're going through these things and need help connecting to resources or people. So I again love to thank you guys for making this happen. I mentioned at the beginning, there was a lot of thought that was put into this presentation. Obviously, there was a lot of slides and a lot of information. If you were able to sign up on Eventbrite, you will get the slides, and we did record the Zoom. So if there's somebody else in the room that wasn't able to be here, you can share those things with them. If you weren't able to sign up on Eventbrite, talk with me or Sierra. We'll make sure that we get your contact information and get those same things over to you. All that said, if you want to see a continuation of this conversation or some iteration of it, let us know. We're looking for class and programming and education ideas. So again, come talk with me, Sierra, or someone on the team. And again, I want to thank all of our partners that helped make this possible. Everyone on our panel, on a credit union, ODEC R&D, hangry. Don't leave hangry, make sure you eat some food. And thank you. Yeah.
On day two, we do this class series every third Thursday, so the next class is social media marketing on May 16th. There'll be a St. Helens class tonight Zoom option, and I have flyers up there if you want to learn more about that class. So thank you all again.
Yes.